Hi there, today we're going to do a comparison between two pretty decent, pretty durable, heavy duty sort of tactical, multi-purpose, multi-function type knives. Neither of these are going to be chef's knives, neither of these are going to be bushcraft knives. These are just knives designed to endure more than anything, I would suggest. So what we've got here is a Gerber strong arm. Very sort of often cited channel knife from me here. And then the other knife I have is the Zero Tolerance 0180 in Vanitas 4 steel. So this is a, I'm not sure if they still make this or not, I think they do. This is a Rick Hendra designed Zero Tolerance knife, so obviously the price is going to be one of the main differences. In fact, the strong arm is $80, is what you can get it in Australia for. I think as low as about $50 US, and the 0180 about $200 US, about 300 Australian dollars while you're here. So we're going to talk today about what the differences are, what you get for your extra $300, $200 rather, or $220, and just show you what each of these knives can do. Let's get into it. Alrighty, so we're looking at two sort of compact survival knives. What's a compact survival knife? Now this is risky. There's about 1 million subgenres. In fact, it's a bit like metal. You know how in metal there's like death metal, there's black metal, there's pirate metal, there's all sorts of different metals. And the fans get really funny when you say it's a certain metal is the wrong kind of metal. And the knife community can be very similar. But for my reference, I call these compact survival knives because they're smaller but they're built like survival knives. So as in thick blades, full tangs, you know, overall slightly overbuilt. So this is like a full-size survival knife. This is the Falcon-Even A1. It's a whole lot bigger. It's got a bigger, you know, thicker handle, thicker blade, longer blade, you know, much larger in general. And I mean much, I guess it's all relative. It's about an extra inch of blade length, but it's got a fair bit of extra heft and it's probably a fair bit tougher. Perhaps than both, I don't know, maybe not, who knows. It's got a convex grind. You can split wood for days with it. You could really wail on these. So you can wail on these too. So they're built sort of with the same level of integrity. They're just a bit smaller. As to comparing it to like a companion knife, which is like a little belt knife that you can carry on you all the time. And there's like metal. There's some cross-genring sometimes goes on. Sometimes you get companion survival knives like the Falcon-Even F1. Oh boy, there is a lot of wordplay involved in these knives. But all I'm saying is that these two are roughly the same genre of like survival, compact, tactical style knives. Oh man, I use the word tactical as well. What am I doing? I'm crazy. Anyway, so let's have a look at what you get in both of these. I'll compare each part of the knife and then we'll sum up with some final thoughts. So for the blades, they've gone hard use. Each company has gone hard use rather by having thick blades of saber grind. So these are about the same thickness. However, the ZT has a bit of swedging at the top, which makes it harder to see, but it does balloon out again to a thicker slab just there. So about the same thickness, you know, 3/16 inch thick style knives. And yeah, they've gone saber grind, which is a strong kind of grind because you've got a sort of a supporting shoulder beginning lower in the knife than say what's a full flat grind, for example. This is a full flat grind. The knife grind goes all the way up here, so really there's full-on contact on both surfaces if you were to stick the knife into something, which therefore means that if you were to twist the knife or you know something was to happen while the knife was in the material, more chance of breakages or chippages or that sort of thing. So saber grind, very strong grind. You make some trade-offs for that. They are probably one of the lesser slicer grinds, so you wouldn't really want it on a kitchen knife, for example, especially at this thickness, but as I said, compact survival knives. So both of them are coated with a sort of substance of some sort. So this is like a paint. Gerber just paint their 420HC, whereas this is like a DLC style coating. So it's got a certain sheen and shine to it, and it definitely feels like it's baked on stronger. So on this knife here, the coating is superior. It has not worn hardly at all, and I've done the exact same tasks with each of these knives, and I've had both these knives for a good long while now, and both have seen extensive use. You see the Gerber does sort of scratch off and flake off a little bit easier. onto the blades, one of the most, the larger differences here is the blade steel. So 420HC is a very simple stainless steel, and this is Vanadis 4, which is a more complex powdered tool steel, which is similar to, say, 3V in terms of having a good balance of toughness and edge retention. This one has toughness for days, both of them do. But yeah, the edge retention is far superior in the Vanadis 4. It's got, so there's really no question. After all this testing I did, this needed to only be stropped, whereas this needed to be sharpened back to get the edge on it. So I did a rope cut test with both of these knives. This is the edge retention portion. This knife cut about 230 times, I believe, through rope until it no longer sliced paper, and this one did about 50 times. So there's a real degree of edge retention difference when you're cutting man-made abrasives at any rate, because rope is, the sisal rope that I use is rather abrasive. Both knives, however, have equal winning at toughness. So I found the two most hideously gnarled and twisted hardwood Aussie ironwood type, the worst wood I could find, and I stuck these knives in it. I wasn't looking to make any type of point other than to demonstrate the toughness of these knives. I got them both well stuck. So the hinderer I got stuck right in the middle of some like gnarly bit of sort of apex wood where about 6 different branches came off. Sorry, not apex, terminus, where like 6 different branches came off at once. Horrible knotty thing. It was difficult, but it went straight through, illustrating the toughness of the knife. This one did the same. I found a piece of wood that's been sitting around for ages, and it was super hard, super seasoned, had a big knuckle in it. It's branching off a portion of a tree, and this one here of course went straight through it as well, so no problems at all with the toughness. Both are supremely tough knives, and both are very, very good tough blades as well. The only difference is going to be the edge retention. Both seem to have the same amount of resistance to chipping and toughness and all the stuff that you associate with perhaps hard using a knife. So say hitting a nail when you're cutting through wood, or hitting a staple when you're cutting through cardboard, stuff like that. Neither of them have chipped out or failed on me in any way, apart from just this one, dulling, which is completely normal part of knife use. Both are currently wearing quite shiny, pretty decent Tormek edges. So in terms of the handles, you get slab G10 for the hinderer, the 0180, and then you get a rubberized overmold for the Gerber strong arm with some plastic, sort of hard plastic guards here, and then hard plastic there. So I'll say initially the handle is actually a little bit more comfortable for standard long-term hammer grip on the Gerber strong arm. So the Gerber has I always prefer the enclosed tang knives, especially with knives that you're going to be doing impact tasks with. That's just my personal preference. This isn't an uncomfortable handle in the standard hammer grip. However, there are certain grips where each of these excel and each of these are weaker than the other one. So for example, when you're doing your fine wood carving, I find that this one here has this flange above here is a little bit annoying to get my thumb over, and you just feel a little bit of distance between you and the wood because your top knuckle is really back behind. The joint of your hand is back behind this one, and your top knuckle is back behind this one. So a little bit of separation from because you like to have your wood about here. So there's that. Whereas this one, you can put your thumb right there and it just feels a little bit more controllable. So for your finer work, this one is the more comfortable knife. However, when you're doing your chopping and your batoning and stuff, you do feel the shocks through this G10 and through this full tang much, much more readily than through the rubberized sort of poly style material there. So each of them have their strengths and their weaknesses. In terms of being durable, this is definitely the more durable handle. These guards here do start to wear and mark when you accidentally do overstrikes if you're striking the back of the knife with something else, which, you know, some people say is abuse, but I think when you make hard use knives like these, I think it should be kind of part of the description that might happen from time to time, whereas this one here, there's really not too much that can go wrong. They've even kind of stepped it down a little bit, so even less chance of the G10 being struck if you have to do some spine strikes there. So very, very, you know, much sort of probably more long-term durable on the $300 0180. And you know what? So it should be. In terms of grip, there's a couple of things I'm not too fond of. I don't like the protrusion of these screws. They stick out a little too far on the 0180. And the Gerber strong arm, I've heard some people suggest that it might be a bit of a slim handle. Some people like a bit more meat on the bones. These parts here pinch a little bit. That's just other criticisms I've heard. With me, I'm not too bothered at all. I think it's just fine, and it grips just fine for me. So yeah, another thing I did notice when I was doing my carving was that, yeah, the grind and the handle, I think those two things, it's a bit of a thicker grind down here on the Gerber. A bit of a sort of steeper, not steeper, shallower, I guess, higher edge angle. Geez, I got there in the end. Does make for a little bit lesser as a wood sort of carving knife, whereas this one seems to do it a little bit better. Just probably the blade geometry, and that's about it. Another thing that I could say is an improvement with the 0180 over the strong arm is this general area here. For sharpening, especially with me on my Tormex system or anyone who uses a stone system, you do appreciate having the little sharpening choil rather than on the Gerber, which kind of just is a little bit of a mess down that end, I must admit. It sort of just suddenly begins to have an edge, and it kind of has a bit of a weird blank dead spot that isn't sharp until about probably ½ an inch up the blade. So whilst the Gerber strong arm has a longer blade, it actually has a fairly similar actual sharp. So in the image now, I've got both edges lined up, you know, for sharpness there, and yeah, it's kind of a little bit more comparable. So if I go tip to tip, you maybe get an extra couple of millimeters from the Gerber, but because really it's not sharp until about here. So yeah, really, in terms of realistic cutting, probably about the same. So yeah, the ZT's just finished a little bit better than the Gerber in that regard. And again, it's $300, so it bloody should be. Looking at the ends of the knife, you've got a glass breaker or a skull cracker or a coconut cracker, pommel on the Gerber, and then you've just got more of a rounded sort of hammer pole on the ZT. Both of them are completely robust and strong. I don't use these parts of knives very often at all. I don't hammer intense stakes with the butt of my knife. I just not a practice I particularly enjoy doing. I'll use something else. I'll use 2 bits of wood or something like that. So, but yeah, you've got a nice big generous lanyard hole here on the ZT, a little bit smaller on the Gerber, but lanyards for either of these knives, I'm not sure. You're not really going to be chopping with them. So if you're going to put them into a chopping roll, you might want to thread a lanyard through each of these, but yeah, no real winner or loser down that end either. In terms of sheaths, ZT made a very interesting and strange decision really to go with a sort of post-aftermarket, it's a good quality Spec Ops brand sheath, but rather than Gerber sort of went and made a tailor-made fitted plastic sheath for the strong arm. Which sheath is better? I don't know. I would have said the strong arm all day of the week, but the strong arm lately, to be honest, hasn't been performing particularly well because this snap here has a habit of coming off, and because you'll put the knife sheath through here, but really the only thing that's holding the sheath in place is just this single snap. A lot of dudes I know use the strong arm a lot have gone and got themselves custom kydex anyway. This one is cool because it's versatile. You can attach this part here and you can run it horizontally through the back of your belt, or you can just take it off entirely. I've only got it on here right now because just for illustration purposes. There's a little tab here that you can pinch and pull through. It's pretty ingenious, but it's just a little bit less perfect than I initially thought. It's still a really, really good sheath as far as factory sheaths go. For this one here, the ZT sheath, you've got just really good Cordura nylon, which is a strong, very versatile material, pretty weatherproof. You can wash it if it gets filthy, and then it's got these 2 straps at the back, which I guess MOLLE compatible because they're quite long. And then you've got a whole bunch of paracord for lashing. You've got all sorts of different options. Really, you can thread things through the stitch down bits, all this sort of stuff. But yeah, there's no real retention to the sheath apart from having a strap that's going across. And some people that might sort of bother. If you're going to mount it upside down, I'd probably recommend against that, because you are just relying on this being done up properly. And you know, sometimes you can snap these. They make a click, and then you know, sometimes they're not done up because you've just sort of missed or moved them across each other, rather than, you know, if you're in a hurry. So yeah, just probably a less thought out sheath, I guess, because it's just a generic. You can buy this sheath for any knife that's about this length. The knife does fit in there fine. It does have a plastic molded section, but yeah, just nothing to stop the knife from falling out, apart from this. So yeah, I'd probably give the edge to maybe the Gerber sheath, just for having a little bit of extra thought put into it, and a little bit of extra pride perhaps. They really did go all out with the strong arm, and true enough, it probably is to be honest, it's probably the one decent Gerber product that's come out in the last couple of years that I've used. I mean, there's been a couple of other cool looking fixed blades. I didn't mind the Gator Pro and yeah, but they're being still plagued with problems, and the strong arm really is their one sort of the beacon of, you know, good design lately. And even then, it is just pretty much a Freeman design without Freeman's name on it. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, sheaths, probably the Gerber, but really, I can see how either would have their proponents. So overall, $300, $100, or, you know, $80. There's a lot of difference here in terms of money, and maybe not a huge amount in terms of day-to-day real-world use. The differences will come out in terms of long-term durability. This is just plastic here. You know, plastic can fail a bit easier than G10 and just straight steel. The edge is eventually going to get sharpened away on the strong arm, so eventually you'll find yourself sharpening it back, because, you know, 420HC isn't going to hold an edge for a whole lot of time unless you're using it only against like food and green wood. Whereas this Vanadis 4 is a real performer. It sort of acts very similar to, like, say, maybe M4 or K390 or 3V, or, you know, probably more in line with 3V or 4V. I think it's actually an analog of 4V, so there you go. You probably are going to get more long-term durability. If you had to take one of these knives to a desert island, you'd probably want the Vanadis, as long as you had some means of sharpening it. So perhaps if you slid a little sharpening stone into your sheath pouch, as long as it had some, I'd recommend a diamond and ceramic stone, because you do need to, when it comes to actually resetting the edge, you do need either a nice old big machine like I've got, or a diamond system, because it can take a little while. It's a bit of a higher hardness still. So I guess going to sharpening, yeah, sharpening is going to be a lot easier on the 420HC, but you'll be doing it much more frequently, whereas this one, you'll often find you can just bring it back to life on a strop, as I sort of illustrate, I guess, in my footage that I'll probably be running right about now. So yeah, overall comparisons, let's wrap this up. So overall, either of these tactical knives is a great choice. You will notice some step-ups in terms of price, but also some step-ups in terms of overall quality in this one, but there's certainly nothing wrong with a Gerber strong arm. They'll both do the job just as well as each other. However, if you're after a little bit more refinement, finesse, just things lasting a little longer, things perhaps performing a little bit better, then you may find a bit of extra money's worth in this Sierra Zero Tolerance. However, an extra $200 worth, that really is up for debate. A lot of other things are going to come into it, things like, you know, brand prestige, things like you know, pride of ownership, all that sort of thing. But the strong arm does actually have a couple of pretty decent wins over this one as well, in terms of, you know, what these knives are designed to do and what they can do. So definitely no shame in stepping for the strong arm over something like this. And the strong arm I always recommend is one of the most brilliant dual type knives that are going. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed this little comparison, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now.